Seoul, 1996. Factories that never turned off their lights, streets filled with Hyundai cars, subways plastered with flashy ads from major conglomerates, Korean products being exported all over the world. No one doubted it anymore. Korea was now the Asian country closest to becoming a developed nation. But then, just 1 year later, the headlines shocked the nation. South Korean government requests emergency bailout from the IMF. National bankruptcy imminent. How could a country that achieved the so-called miracle on the Han River suddenly face economic collapse? In 1953, when the Korean War finally ended, the Korean peninsula was left in ruins. The roads were destroyed, there was no industry, and people were starving. And yet, astonishingly, within just 30 years of the war's end, Korea began building cars, launching shipyards, and exporting semiconductors. This became known as the miracle on the Han River. An average economic growth rate of 8 to 10%. It was a pace of development no other country in the world had ever experienced. Made in Korea went from meaning cheap goods to cutting-edge electronics. Exports became the lifeblood of the economy. And at the heart of it all was a unique alliance between the Korean government and powerful conglomerates known as chaebols. Korea's economic growth was rapid and powerful. But beneath the surface, it was like a balloon about to burst. With strong government backing, the major conglomerates began expanding recklessly. They built shipyards while launching semiconductor businesses. They sold electronics while diving into the automobile industry. How was all of this even possible? The answer: debt. Banks gave out massive loans to these corporations. Why? Because the government acted almost like a guarantor. Thanks to this unofficial safety net, companies could take out billions in loans, even with very little of their own capital. By 1996, the average debt-to-equity ratio of Korea's top chaebols exceeded 400%. What does that mean? It's like running a company worth 10 billion won, but only 2 billion is your own money. The remaining 8 billion is borrowed from banks. In the 1990s, Korea embraced the idea. Let's liberalize our financial markets, just like advanced countries. The government lifted regulations, making it easy for foreign capital to flow in. Korean companies and financial institutions could now borrow dollars from abroad with ease. At first, it seemed like a dream. Exchange rates were stable, and foreign money poured into the country. Dollars were cheap to borrow, and with that debt, businesses could invest even more. But there was a serious flaw. Korean firms and banks were taking on massive short-term foreign debt, loans that had to be repaid quickly. And here's the problem. If foreign investors sensed even the slightest trouble, they could pull their dollars out instantly. It was like a skyscraper with a glass floor. It looked impressive, until cracks began to form underneath. July 1997, Southeast Asia. The Thai government announced it could no longer defend its currency, the baht, and devalued it sharply. This triggered a wave of panic among global investors. Are emerging Asian economies more fragile than we thought? Investors began pulling their money out, and the panic spread. From Thailand to Indonesia, to Malaysia, and then to South Korea. January 1997. One of Korea's top 14 conglomerates, Hanbo Group, went bankrupt. But this wasn't just a business failure. It exploded into a massive corruption scandal, entangling politicians and bankers. Then came Kia Motors, Sami Group. Major companies began falling one after another, and investors started to think, if this is happening, Korea must be in serious trouble. So, they began pulling their money out fast. As foreign capital rushed out of Korea, the exchange rate began to skyrocket. The Korean won collapsed in a matter of days. From 800 won to 1,000, then over 1,500 won per US dollar. The Korean government scrambled to use its foreign reserves to stop the bleeding. But it wasn't nearly enough. Within just 1 to 2 months, Korea's foreign currency reserves were nearly gone. The country could no longer pay for imports, or repay its debts to foreign lenders. And so, the Korean government had no choice but to raise the white flag. On November 21, 1997, the government of South Korea officially requested emergency assistance from the International Monetary Fund. The global media was stunned. Just a year earlier, Korea had been hailed as a model for emerging economies. Now, it was on the brink of national bankruptcy. In the end, Korea secured a $58 billion bailout package. But the price was steep. It had to accept a series of harsh conditions from the IMF. The IMF demanded, to stabilize your currency, you must raise interest rates. In response, the Bank of Korea raised its base rate to nearly 20%. But here was the problem. Most Korean companies were already surviving on borrowed money. The sudden spike in interest rates triggered a brutal chain reaction. Corporate bankruptcies, mass layoffs, shrinking consumer spending, more bankruptcies. It was the start of a vicious cycle, one of the worst in Korea's economic history. The IMF also called for sweeping corporate and banking reforms. Chaebols, which had grown like tangled vines, were told to break up. Inefficient divisions had to be shut down. Incompetent executives had to go. And in the process, hundreds of thousands of workers were laid off. This was the first time the term mass layoffs became a grim reality in Korean society. At the end of 1997, Korea's unemployment rate was just over 2%. But within a year, it soared past 7%. This wasn't just about losing jobs. It meant losing family stability, future dreams, even social connections. The middle class began to collapse, and a new term entered the Korean vocabulary, the IMF generation. But in the midst of all this despair, something incredible happened. January 1998. The Korean government launched a gold collection movement. Wedding rings, babies' first rings, gold necklaces, gold leaf, commemorative coins. People brought whatever gold they had from their homes. One woman cried as she donated her late mother's keepsake. A child brought gold-colored trinkets from his piggy bank. In just 4 months, 227 tons of gold, worth over $2.2 billion, were collected. The world watched in awe. Is there any other country where citizens rally for their nation like this? The crisis eventually passed. And in just 3 years, Korea repaid the entire debt it had borrowed from the IMF. After that, Korea rebuilt itself, accumulating foreign reserves, allowing the currency to float freely, reforming corporate accounting practices, and pushing through major chaebol and financial reforms. Today, Korea is featured in economics textbooks around the world as a model nation that overcame the IMF crisis. This isn't just a story about an economic crisis from the past. It's one of the most dramatic chapters in modern history. A nation confronting the dark side of its growth, enduring the pain, and rising again through the unity of its people. And for many emerging economies today, this story remains a vital and timely lesson. In 1996, the world believed Korea's success would only continue. But just a year later, the nation fell apart. And yet, who was it that stood back up from the ruins? The people, ordinary people, people just like you. So now, if your country were to face a crisis tomorrow, could we create another miracle?